Welcome to the Class Apart. I'm your host, Arjun. Thank you for joining me as I embark upon a journey across the world of higher education. Each episode, we'll discover exciting alumni experiences, gain industry insights with various stakeholders, and explore the ever-changing landscapes of global learning. Hello everyone, welcome to the Class Apart. Today I've brought a friend with me who I met during my undergrad in Nottingham. Very interesting today. He did his undergraduate in the USA and his postgraduate in Nottingham. So Karun, welcome to the show. How's it going?
Hi Arjun. Thanks for having me. It's going well. Thank you for the kind introduction as well.
Before we really get into everything, I just wanted to ask, where did you do your undergraduate and postgraduate?
Right. So I pursued my undergraduate, as you mentioned, in the US, and I went to a university called Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University. So as technical as it sounds, it is an aviation university located in the state of Florida. I was in Daytona Beach, and it was about a 4-year course in my early days. So yeah, that's where I held my undergraduate for a 4-year degree, followed by master's to the University of Nottingham Trent in the UK, which was a 1-year master's course, which was a big shift as well.
Wow. So basically you're telling me that you went to Daytona Beach in Florida and did your undergraduate in aviation. And then you went on to do your master's in the UK. So I'm guessing that makes you a classified pilot, like a authorized, classified, qualified pilot.
Well, yes, I could, shed a little more light on what I did in my undergrad. It is really apart as far as other courses go. So my inspiration for my undergrad all came about just from the aviation industry in itself. It's something I've always had in the background, in my family. We've had a bit of history, so it's something which I guess I've always looked to pursue at some point. However, it's something which at that age you just go with. I mean, it's something on instincts, a bit of gut, and yeah, it was a challenge for me, which I took up, and I did pursue aviation. However, I mean, it was a holistic course in aviation. So although aeronautical science might sound a little technical and, maybe something in the parts of engineering, but it was a holistic course in aviation, which allowed me to basically scope not just the technical side of it, but also the business side of it, and give me a full overview of the aviation industry.
Wow.
So yes, along with that did come flying. Yeah, I did fly along with that as well. I did log over 1,200 hours flying as well. I am technically a commercially qualified pilot in the US to fly airlines. And that's where my journey began, and that's where my journey stopped.
To be honest, that's pretty awesome. I don't think many people I know have gone into aviation. And I remember the first time we met, when you said aviation science, it sounded to me like you were one of those guys who sat in that box up in the air at an airport and just saw the flights leaving and landing. And I was just like, all right, that doesn't sound like too much fun. But the more I learned about it, the cooler it became. But before we get into the details of like what you did over there and your course and lifestyle, etc., I just wanted to ask, why leave India?
Right. So for me, I guess my first step outside was my undergraduate. One's sole reason for getting into that was, I guess, my parents always wanted me to get in higher education. For me personally, at that age, I'll be honest, it was not something you really completely understood or realized the value of higher education. I was only 17 at the time when I left for university. It was something, of course, that my parents, wanted me to pursue. And it was something, of course, I was more than willing to take up at the time. And aviation itself as a subject was always interesting to me. So I did take it up. Did I realize the value at the time of what higher education brings along with it? Absolutely not. But all I knew was that it was an opportunity for me to pursue my education ahead. And I think I did pretty decent in school. So my parents actually had a lot of belief in me. I think that contributes as a major factor as to why you get sent abroad.
Definitely. I mean, I've seen it on a regular basis where if the parents aren't confident that you can manage it or you can hack it, and the confidence in parents normally comes from grades. I mean, it's not even about personality or can he even or she even fend for herself or himself. It's just predominantly all about the grades. But I mean, it sounds pretty awesome. I mean, at the end of the day, you got the experience, and I'm sure, as we'll come to find out, it has helped you in multiple ways. What were for the USA and the UK, what were the motivating and kind of influencing factors in choosing that institution and that program?
Right. So for me, as I said, choosing the institution, which is Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, it was amongst aviation, the top 2 universities in the world at the time, and still is. So for me, initially applying for my undergrad, I did not have too many options as such, or too many places that I myself wish to really travel to and go. I had my eyes set on a couple of places, one of them having to be in New Zealand, which was another aviation and aviation university as well, followed by this one in the United States. Luckily for me, it all worked out well, and I think my grades clearly held up good enough to get me admission in this university over here. And the second I found out that I've been accepted into Embry-Riddle, I had no second thoughts that I was sure that I wanted to pursue this going forward, because this was a childhood passion of mine to take up aviation. So yeah, that made it easier.
And Nottingham?
So then Nottingham for me was, close to 4 years after undergrad. So, I think by then I had plenty of experience, not just in my undergrad, but also out in the real world as well. And by the time I went for my higher education, for my master's in Nottingham, I was exactly sure, in fact, what I wanted to do, what course I wanted to do, what subjects I wanted, and what I wanted to actually achieve out of it. In fact, the fact that I went to and for my undergrad propelled me to go for my master's. That experience in my undergrad, I probably would not have pursued a master's abroad as well, just because of the lack of understanding of what a master's degree brings along with it. And I think my undergrad for me really sold me that I do want to pursue my master's abroad, and it does bring an outlook and a view completely different that would have otherwise.
Sweet. So, just for my understanding, what was the exact course title for your program in Nottingham?
So Nottingham Trent, I pursued my master's in international business, which required me, it was a course which basically dealt something on the lines of entrepreneurship, along with the fact of carrying out business as an open trade in the open market and in the open world, as a global trade. It also encouraged us to take up an internship outside the UK as such for about 4 months, which was primarily, I guess, the main project in Nottingham Trent. That really assured me that, yes, this is something I want to take up, because there's one thing I realized about university was that as much as there is, classroom education, experience was something that counted greatly for me. And international business was one course, probably one of the only courses that actually offered that opportunity to travel to another country to take up a live project, which you could actually see flourishing and see end results to.
Where'd you go for the project?
So we were sent to Kanya, Greece, which was a very remote place at the time. And it was beautiful. We'd actually been set up with an independent extra virgin olive oil producer, and Greece is actually known pretty well for their olive oil. And to be put into a market as such in a small place. And yeah, our job was as simple. It was to take a simple product in a place like Kanya, Greece, and find a way to make its reach into the global market, which was ideal after a course like international business. It was absolutely ideal because it empowered me with all the tools and all the things I could possibly, I learned over the past 7 or 8 months in my education. And I was immediately able to apply those to a live project. And it was absolutely exciting. And spent about 3 weeks in Greece presenting to the owners of the company. For them, this was a free option whether to take it, to take our inputs as such or no. But I, for one, am very proud because I know my product made it into the Scandinavian market. So it is something which actually it took up as a project and actually did make it to some stage based on the recommendations we made. So that was a really proud and happy moment.
That must have been awesome. As a student, you get put on this project in Greece. Let's be honest, Greece doesn't exactly have the strongest economy even now. And all of a sudden, you get a couple of months to work on it and you manage to succeed within that time frame.
It was an opportunity which you would never see coming. And as I said, for it to flourish the way it did was absolutely exciting.
But would you say that this opportunity to do a project like this was one of the selling points into why you went to Nottingham Trent?
Well, the reason I applied to Nottingham Trent in particular was the fact that it offered the course I was looking for, as I said, along with the fact that, yes, it did offer me the opportunity to have hands-on experience.
Mm-hmm. So, that sounds quite familiar as well, because one of the motivating factors for you to go for that was the fact that you got international exposure and that you managed to work on a business project internationally. That was one of the reasons why I went to Nottingham Trent as well, because of the choices that I had when I was looking for my undergraduate program. Nottingham Trent was one that gave me an industrial year in my third year, and I was, why not? Let's do it.
Absolutely.
I mean, there is a part of me that is also asking myself. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ask you as well. The value of international business as a program. Do you think that if you studied the same curriculum, same teachers, similar infrastructure in India, would it have the same impact? Because I get the feeling that being in an international location and studying international business will add a lot more perspective than it would if you were studying international business but locally.
Well, that's actually a great question, Arjun. I mean, as far as universities go, and the primary reason for picking universities, as you said, classroom teachings can be done online. If it's the same material, it's the same content, it's the same teacher, whether you're present in a classroom location or present online. It can be carried out in the same style and fashion. However, as far as studying in the actual location, no matter where that might be to travel, the experience in itself changes completely. So, as much as I did want to go to university, Nottingham Trent, for the course itself, the exposure that the classroom in the UK would bring along with it was unparalleled. It's something I learned really early in my undergrad as well. And being a big part of the education system in India throughout, I've actually seen a few different systems wherein I guess I do have some baseline to compare education systems and what it's brought along with it. And I cannot be thankful enough for having a diverse background in terms of being able to pursue it in a couple of other countries. And what classroom education brings along with it in another country is something I believe it cannot be replicated in India for multiple reasons. And I mean, that might come from having a particular outlook or mindset to the same set of students, to having, there's nothing more important than having perspective in a classroom, I guess, over a period of time. As much as you have certain content to go over and study, the perspective that I believe an international classroom brings along with it is something that really stands out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try and give both experiences and both universities, like the one in the States and the one in the UK, their due diligence. But to be very honest with you, I'm kind of more inclined to talk about your experience in the USA, because as far as I understand, not many people go for aviation science, right? But you do get a fair number of people that go for international business. But aviation is definitely not something that people do, which I think is genuinely quite cool. You obviously know what I do for a living right now, and the amount of requests I get for engineering and everything. it's kind of ridiculous.
I'm sure.
Yeah. Did both of the universities meet your expectations?
Yes, in its own certain ways. Yes, it gave me a lot of learnings as far as expectation goes. I think my undergrad and my postgrad, actually, I think both of them exceeded my expectations as far as what the university had to offer. Now, I don't mean this purely in educational terms, but I mean as the overall experience that universities have brought along with. It's not something you can prepare for. It's not something you can plan for. It's not something you can imagine that you're going to get yourself into. It's something only when you look back in hindsight do you realize how much more it is than just the education itself that you've pursued over there. So yes, as far as delivering the overall expectation of what a university and an international education abroad would offer, I definitely think it's beyond my expectations.
That's pretty awesome. If there are some members of staff from the universities that ever do listen to this, I think they'd be quite happy to hear that.
Absolutely, like you said, I mean, as far as even my undergrad goes, and there aren't too many people, exponents or students for that matter, who I think are looking to pursue the undergrad abroad. I think majority of the students are looking to, pursue a master's abroad as such, because it's a shorter course. It's probably more focused, and by then you're pretty sure what line you want to get into. For me as an undergrad, to spend 4 years, taking up a degree, honestly, in which we'll get to, I do not even pursue that field today at the moment. It's not something which I guess at that early an age you would assume that you would take up that easily. But as you said, for me, my course was something very different. It stood out, and it was something that I took up because of an hobby. I mean, if someone told me today I'd be sitting here doing what I am after the degree I pursued, I would have laughed at the moment. But yeah, I can fondly look back at it over that today.
Now the topics come up. What do you do right now?
Right. So, well, a little about myself right now. So currently for the past couple of years, in fact, for that matter, from the time I finished my postgrad, I have worked with 2 companies, both of them being in retail. I currently am working for a company called TATA Croma, which is basically an electronics retail company, and they're into electronic consumer goods. Yeah, I've been basically looking after the e-commerce for a particular section of the country, and now I'm working with their business excellence team, developing new strategies going forward for them. Well, looking at I guess my background from, coming from aviation as such, this is not something I immediately thought. Of course, the opportunity presented itself. It's something I grabbed onto and took it up. But as I said, if someone told me what I am today working, I mean, I probably wouldn't have seen it coming.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have seen it coming. But
yeah, in all fairness, I did have, as you said, what a typical Indian student would have, which is a technical background after my undergrad, and that's something I learned really quick once I graduated university. Although I did have holistic course in aviation, which allowed me to explore flying aspect of it, the engineering aspect of it, the business part of it. I think what that allowed me to do was really narrow down my focus post my undergrad. And I mean, if there was one thing I excelled at, I knew it was more towards a business, managerial, strategic side of things more than the actual technical sides of things. So post my undergrad, I was convinced regarding my master's that no matter the course, I was sure that I did want to pursue something towards the line of business, because in my head, ideally, if I've pursued aviation itself is very niche as a subject. So for me to then get out and pursue my master's in something which would have been equally niche would have really limited my options. And ironically enough, if there's one thing university taught me going abroad and, doing a particular course, is learning the fact that I really do not want to limit myself in certain options. And I probably actually am not that interested in really specializing in a field so niche that tomorrow, if I wish to explore another area, I cannot. So my postgrad was actually heavily influenced by what I'd pursued in my undergrad, which is a very technical degree. So I did want to pursue a degree like international business, which you said is slightly generic, but it worked beautifully for me because it allowed me to combine my technical part of my background and expertise along with the business side of it. So I was actually able to see both avenues and combine the two to then take that experience along with me into work.
Sweet. So I'm coming back to the university topic and your undergraduate, postgraduate. Obviously, as you mentioned earlier, you were 17 when you left India and you came back a significant number of years later. I'm assuming coming back wasn't significantly hard because, I mean, at the end of the day, you are coming back home. But when you left to the USA, especially, I mean, USA to UK, I'm not too sure how big the shock would have been. But when you left from India to the USA, you must have struggled somewhere. I mean, I think everyone does, and it's only natural to struggle. Where were some of the places which you kind of really struggled with? And how was the support system at the university? If you used it, if you didn't, then if you wouldn't mind kind of elaborating on what you did do.
Well, as far as universities go and going at an early age for your undergrad, no one at the age of 17 could have prepared me to go to university, let alone the fact that I think I'd been to 2 destinations internationally prior to this, not a lot of exposure. I'd never been to the United States prior to this either, nor have my parents. So for me, my only perspective that's come from the United States or any other country for that matter was through movies. This for me felt like a movie, something that I was being put into to go, to do things like the American dream and then to be pursuing a degree in the United States and, you're going for 4 years. At the age of 17, a lot of this did not make sense to me. It all felt absolutely surreal. It was just one step at a time. I took it up as a challenge initially. And yeah, as I said, it was something I could have never prepared for. The moment I landed over there, I think my parents were equally shocked because it was their first time too. So I think we all together faced a bit of a culture shock. But I think what that moment made me realize along with my parents was the fact that, they're probably going to be leaving in a week's time and I had to spend the next 4 years of my life over there in a new country with new people, in a new setting, classrooms. Whereas I was an absolute homebody and homegrown. And yeah, I've always been very close to home and very grounded in that regard. So this for me was going to be a whole new challenge altogether. Building a support system and managing things over there were all things which would come, of course, in time. It was something I learned. This is not something, I guess, that you can be taught, prior to going to university.
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
absolutely.
I did have an introductory course. I had a lead-up session to my university, but there's absolutely nothing that can prepare you for the moment from the time you land over there. As I said, for me, going to the United States was, I can just from the top of my head, I can speak about a few different things that immediately, struck me was just how vast that country is in terms of, their infrastructure, how developed things are. I mean, you'd believe it's like a movie set initially, but you realize, the enormity of things from the moment you're there, the people you interact with. I mean, as I said, like, even observing different types of people, the different cultures, the different blends of people that I've met. Again, these are things I only saw in movies. And for me to go over there and then actually have to face these people right up front was a little intimidating initially, of course, as well. This brings to light an incident on the second day, I believe, of me just landing in the US, preparing for the first time to move into my dorm. And it was a shared dorm, of course, as a typical undergrad would have. It was, a room which I knew I was sharing with another roommate at the time. And all I had was an information about his name. And well, as we all know at the time, Facebook had just launched. My point being, there was no such social media where you had the opportunity to maybe stalk someone, look someone up, see who you're living with, who you're dealing with. I mean, I had absolutely no idea in this new country who and what I'm going to be walking into. Yeah, I mean, this is not something you even considered at the time because it simply wasn't an option. People and students today have an option to, I do not want to come across in the wrong way, but you can come to know someone's family history if you want to before you can even reach and live with that person in university. At this point, information is that easily accessible. At the time, if someone told me that I'd be walking in and as I said, my roommate turned out to be an African-American at the time living over there. I won't lie when I say it was literally, my first day I spent in a hotel in the United States. So I did not really meet or see anyone. My second day in my university was the first time I really came across different people, different kinds of people coming from different aspects, from different countries for that matter. And I mean, for me to then walk in and find out that my first university roommate for the next 2 years is going to be an African-American. Again, I know I come across a little crass when I say it the way I am, but these are things I only saw in the movies. I mean,
it's a culture shock. Right? I mean, you don't expect.
Right. I've never seen someone of another skin color, if that makes sense prior to this either. So for me to just see that, I mean, your first instinct is like, oh, damn, these are like, this is exactly like the movies. Like, you'd imagine a certain thing and you'd imagine them to say certain things. And I think what you don't realize at that age of 17 is that, no matter where and who you come across from, I mean, university is the same for everyone. Day one in school is no different for anyone. Everyone equally has his nerves, no matter what aspect, no matter what part of life you come from, no matter what country you come from. And I think that is something that we immediately struck chord with everyone and each and one of us. I mean, although these guys would have just probably traveled locally, it was a move irrespective which everyone
you're
had just
moving
made
out
for
of
the
home,
first time
like
in life.
Yeah, everyone is just kind of moving out.
Correct.
Home.
So for them, it's absolutely, and you realize quickly that this is going to be a support system around you. Yeah. I mean, if you look around you carefully, you will realize that these are the same people in the same boat as you, and there is absolutely no difference between, what the two of you are thinking at the moment. And it's just a matter of breaking that barrier and getting out. And from the moment we began speaking, we realized, most of the things we thought about were pretty much on the same page as far as what we thought about university and our expectations and going away from home. It was different, but it immediately made me realize that, I think I'll hold up just about fine with the people I was surrounded by at the time. And I quickly realized that support system as such, which you mentioned, which would ideally I thought about would be, going and seeking someone and finding my comfort person. I mean, that went for a toss immediately once I realized that, the support system is only what you make of it yourself and what you have around you. So that is something that, naturally came about. And that's something which, as again, I said, no one could have prepared me for.
Definitely. Considering the fact that, like, obviously you just can't be prepared. I mean, it doesn't matter however you walk into it. It's impossible to be prepared for something like that. But what are a couple of things, like maybe 2 or 3 things that you probably would have liked to know before you went?
Well, plenty in hindsight, I mean, when I went to university initially, we had a basic briefing telling you, hey, this is the university you're going to be going to. This it looks like. The best you could possibly tell me is what that university has to offer and what is possibly I could expect to gain at the end of my university. That's about it as far as briefings go for your university. There's nothing I could question at the time because I was equally blank too. But now that I look back, I mean, I wish, we just started from the fact that forget about university. Here's a student who you're taking from a country he's probably never left. I mean, you've never left to go abroad, study, forget the fact that it's a new country altogether. Would have probably been a good idea to maybe start with a bit of history of the country itself, because at the end of the day, you're probably going to be going and living in the country with the people over there, speaking to them, dealing with them every day, your teachers. I think it's just more than a fact that you're going to a university. It's a fact understanding the surroundings you're entering into, be it from a cultural point of view, from a historical point of view, from a country point of view. I think these are things which are important to kind of understand as to where maybe a country as a whole stands, so that you are also able to understand. So look, at the end of the day, as much as you can connect with anyone individually one-on-one, I think just understanding an outlook as a whole would have been really helpful. I mean, we did speak English over there, but I think this has become a pretty common joke now for people to crack, knowing that, US English is not comparable to any sort of other English that is spoken around the rest of the world. And
That's so true.
It's funny that you laugh over this, and it's something that which people get now, and it's commonly joked about. But if this is not something you understood back then, and you were sent over there, it can be pretty intimidating, and that's something I realized really quick. Luckily for me, I think I'm able to hold myself well up with the English language itself, and I feel very comfortable being able to speak the language. So for me, understanding that something is different, or things are in a different way, I thought would not be that difficult. I did have, prior to going for my undergrad, I did study IB, which is International Baccalaureate, and that itself is an international course. So I thought I was pretty well versed, or as well versed as I could be, to go to America, carry out life without having any difficulties, especially in the field of communication. I think one of the first things that I got called out over there in America was my communication. Funnily enough, I got called out for my enunciations. I got called out for the way you pronounce certain things, and no one tells you and prepares you for such things. And I still remember having a conversation with my roommate regarding going to the gym, or working out in something called your quadriceps, which for me means your quads, a part of your thigh. Because at the end of it, what he told me is like, oh, what you're trying to say is quadricep. And I'm like, and he's like, why are you announcing the word so like weirdly? That's not how you pronounce a word. And that was probably one of the first indicators I realized that something seems a little different over you. And the more I went into the language, and the more you start conversing with people, you realize that there is a big difference between your UK English and US English. So I mean, these are things that no one could prepare you for, and I wish I definitely knew a little more, just in terms of understanding the culture, the language. Would have cost a little less bullying probably, but it was something that of course was all a part and parcel of the learning curve as well. Absolutely.
Funny that you mentioned bullying. Maybe we'll get back to that some other time, but we've talked a lot about kind of the shocks that you went through, and kind of what the traveling experience was like, what it was to kind of experience classroom learning, and kind of the academic perspective of university, why you chose to go there. And I think, to be honest, this is probably my favorite question that I have to ask, because I mean, once you've done all of that, it's kind of something that I value very highly from my experiences. The experiences outside of university, like lifestyle, extracurriculars. It's university, so I'm assuming you did some wild stuff. We'll try and keep that out of the way. But I mean, it's just a whole different world. It's a whole different learning experience altogether.
It is. I'm not going to forget the fact that my primary reason of going to university was to pursue an education. Let's get that right. That is your primary function and motive of going to university. Well, let's put it this way, that's what I thought, at least before I went for either of the university courses. If there's one thing I realized getting out of university, or the first thing was that no matter how much I must have picked up academically, the biggest thing that I took out of university, my undergrad and my postgrad, were experiences. That is something that there is absolutely no trade for, and no amount of education, online or classroom, can prepare you for the experiences that might bring an international education abroad, as you may have put it. For me, as I said, when I pursued my undergrad, I did have a motive. I did know what I wanted to study. I went with a purpose over there. But the second I left university for my undergrad over there, I immediately realized this is not the degree I want to pursue. This is not the field I want to pursue. And for the first time, I probably had an idea for what I wanted to pursue by doing something for 4 years that I absolutely did not want to at the time. What it made me realize was that, you will come out learning. The more you learn about something, and the more you learn about different things, the more you probably get interested in it. I mean, with the way the world moves right now, you cannot kind of contain yourself to one thing. There's so much information out there at the moment that there's always something different you can look to always pursue. For me, going from my undergrad to my postgrad was where I probably took my first actual decision of, choosing a university for educational purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to that, they were completely laden with experiences, as you said, good or bad. For me, post my undergrad, my master's was something which, as keen as I was on going it, I knew exactly what I wanted to do, exactly what course I wanted to take up. As I said, I emphasized on the fact that I was very keen on getting an experience from a university, which surprisingly is something that not too many universities offered. So Trent kind of actually helped easily narrow down that option for me. However, I did not just get admission into Trent. It wasn't something which was offered to me freely upon or something that was a free choice. So for me, very honestly, at that point, it was either that I'm taking up Nottingham Trent University, or I'm not too sure whether I was even keen to pursue my master's at all, abroad at the time at all.
Yeah.
I worked as hard as I could, as I said, through my undergrad, everything. I kind of understood maybe what I wanted to pursue ahead. But at the time of application, I actually initially did get denied entry into Trent because I did not meet their standard and, certain educational qualifications and grades that are required. I was possibly nowhere near that at the time. I did manage to make it to the university, and the only thing that saved me at the time was not my grades, not the fact that I had a 2.3 GPA, not the fact that I already had an education abroad. It was actually the experiences that I was able to share directly with the dean of the course. I was able to actually have a word directly with the dean of the course at the time. I was absolutely sure that, this is something that I knew I would be able to do well in the educational part of it or otherwise. And that is something I was able to convince the dean of the course at the time through my experiences in the US. I mean, purely on extracurriculars. Experience absolutely nailed down my position in the university. And that was the last conversation we had, after which I received my acceptance offer without any further trouble whatsoever. So what I realized quickly was that academics, as much as you might play a big role, there's nothing like experience as such in terms of what it might bring along. Clearly, the dean must have heard something on the lines of why I should even be good enough to be a part of this course. I mean, the fact that I went on to then be class representative for my course, for my master's, could only
from being
sums
almost
it up better
rejected
than
to class rep.
anything else. Absolutely, from not being academically qualified enough to pursue a course to then being made class representative of the course.
Fair play.
That for me, I think, was one of the few moments which felt like, yes, I felt accomplished. I felt like the purpose of my education, the things that I've taken with me, academically, non-academically, my experiences have all counted for something today, because
Definitely.
I was never the brightest student. When you learn to be by yourself, you take things up by yourself, you study, you live in a different community, you learn different ways. These are things which, again, in an international background and an international course, studying international business, I think my entire experience put together was something which just absolutely helped propel me through that course.
Fair play. Sounds awesome. That's quite a story as well. Just moving on from the bigger picture, from the overall scheme of things, are you an advocate of international higher education? And if so, why?
I absolutely am. But the Indian system offers you a lot is going by the book. That's one thing I learned really quick, was the fact that, Indian education is based on the book. However, going to universities and international education for that matter, the first thing I realized was that, a lot of these things are based purely on experience. Today, when you're working, no matter how local you might be working, there's always a touch of globalization to it. And you're always gonna, in some form or other, find yourself interacting with, if not directly with someone, then indirectly in a form where you do have to consider, not just your own point of view or your country's point of view, but even a more international point of view. And that is something which cannot be built solely by, pursuing an education in a country.
Thanks for joining me today. It's been awesome talking, and best of luck.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure having this chat. I'm glad I'm able to share, a few insights into what education and international education has brought for me. Anything I'd want someone else to take from this is that just remember that, when you're going out for university to study abroad, as much as it is about education, the experience that you're about to have and about to bring with you, no form of education will ever be able to trump that. And I think if you go with an open mindset of that, you will learn really soon that you're about to become a global citizen. So yeah, on that note, I'd thank you as well once again.